Listen, this is a serious podcast discussing issues about learning disability, and I thought I'm not going to do something gratuitous like get my son to burp loudly just to get your attention. And then I thought, what the heck?
It's Downs with the Kids podcast.
Welcome to episode 2. The person you heard just there is Jamie, who's Stan's speech and language therapist. And for this podcast, I've interviewed her.
He is now using his language in all his environments to communicate effectively with people around him.
Also this time, Down syndrome hits the headlines with the Sally Phillips documentary, A Future Without Down Syndrome. So we'll be talking about that. So my son, Stanley Palmer, has Down syndrome, and this podcast is all about Stan and his family and friends. It's Downs with the Kids, the podcast. So, Down's syndrome has been in the news with actor Sally Phillips from Miranda. What else is she in? Oh, one of my favourites, The Thick of It. Also, Bridget Jones's Diary. She has a son called Ollie, who's a couple of years younger than our Stan. And she asked the question about testing during pregnancy and therefore, the technological advances of that. And therefore the propensity for more terminations to occur, because you can find out more easily these days whether a child's going to have Down syndrome. She asked the question whether there will be a world without Down syndrome in the next few years. Very good documentary. I'm sure you can still get it on the iPlayer at the time of recording at least. But it led to radio phone-ins and newspaper articles. And in fact, I was approached by the Sun newspaper because I think I might have seen blog, etc. online, wanting to know my views. And in fact, my view is fairly standard on this sort of thing, in that it's all very well having a diagnosis either during pregnancy or after the birth. But are there the pieces of information for parents and family members? How do the people know what to do? And in fact, the answer to that question is there's loads and loads of information out there, and there is no excuse not to get the best quality information about what you can do, not just have an informed choice about whether to continue with a pregnancy, but also what to do with a child with Down syndrome who's now in your family. And so the Down Syndrome Association have the Tell It Right, Start It Right training for midwives and nurses and doctors and all sorts of people involved in hospital births, so that they all can react to the news in a relaxed and groovy fashion, and life is a bit better for the people involved. And I think people talk about a woman's right to choose, and that's really important, but I also want to highlight anybody's right to getting the best quality information. So when the child is born or when there's a diagnosis, that there should be the right to get the best quality information so that you start your new journey in the best informed way. And so that's pretty much what we told the Sun. And it was quite nice because, me and Stan had our picture in there. And, I think it's important for dads to be included in the picture. So there was Rosa Monkton, whose daughter has Down syndrome. And then our picture was next to that. So that was quite nice for dads to be involved. Big up the dads. But as I say, I think the programme should still be available. And certainly thought-provoking.
It's Downs with the Kids.
That interview with the speech and language expert in a moment. First, though, a couple of other little recordings. Okay, I'm at the horses where we go on Saturday mornings now with Stan. And he used to go on this horse called Violet, but today he's on Arthur. Now, Arthur is his head, where his ears are about 6 foot off the ground. If a very tall person, 6 foot person, stood next to the horse, the ears would be taller. So he's enormous. He's a Shire horse, really. Well, in my mind, he's got big white furry feet and stands on him. It's absolutely brilliant. He's been upgraded. So we go to this stables on a Saturday morning, and what it is it's disabled people and non-disabled people all together. Some are on the horses, some are directing the horses. So it's a pretty cool vibe here on a Saturday morning. But yeah, Stan is on this monster, and he's loving every second of it. Hang on, see if we can get hold of him to say something. Stan, is it a big horse?
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I started doing this podcast was because I was finding myself listening to more and more podcasts. So I thought I'd just tell you about 4 briefly that I like. I like the Freakonomics podcast, that's very good. This American Life. And from over here, the Ellis James and whatever the other guy's name is from Radio X. They're all good ones. But the one I really want to recommend is Edinburgh Man. Not just because it's good, but it turns out he's a really nice bloke. He just basically plays Edinburgh Man, and he plays kind of indie records from his front room. But he's just had a second child, and he's really tired all the time. So he talks about that, and the one I've just listened to, he talks about the rubbish was being put out that night. He just basically talks a lot of bollocks between the records. So it's highly entertaining, and as I say, he's a really nice bloke, because I was into his podcast, and when I was trying to find out how to host this, I emailed him, thinking, well, I might not ever hear from him again, or ever. And 10 minutes later, he emailed me with some instructions on what to do and advice, and it was just brilliant, really helpful. So I recommend it if you just want to sort of listen to stuff that's just talking lots and lots of rubbish, but also some good music. Then Edinburgh Man. How old are you?
14.
You're 14?
Yeah.
You're going to be 15 soon?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you going to be 15 soon?
Yeah.
Right. And what's your name?
Daddy. My name is Baba.
And now the interview with Jamie, the speech and language expert. And we actually started off talking about the Sally Phillips documentary. And she'd found this brilliant thing online, which she's going to read out now, which is all about attitudes to Down syndrome. And then the interview follows.
I have a naturally occurring chromosome arrangement that has always been part of the human condition. My life has just as much value as any other, including yours. Can you imagine a doctor walking in and saying, your baby has Down syndrome? Don't worry though. Children have been born with Down syndrome since the beginning of time. Something as simple as the language we use could change the perception of how the world views my child and so many other children. What a wonderful, wonderful world it would be.
Sometimes Stan tests me to the limit. So how's it? So I'm going to talk to Jamie now. How's he doing?
Stanley Palmer is doing amazing. He can be challenging. However, his language continues to progress. He tries so hard to impress everyone around him, and he is now using his language in all his environments to communicate effectively with people around him.
And it's weird because I've sat in with a lot of sessions with you since you started with us, and it's amazing how he's come on. So what would you say to people who would say that it's a bit of a hopeless cause? Someone like Stan or someone with Down syndrome or autism, when you start working with them, you've seen a lot of people change, quite dramatically, haven't you?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly as a speech and language therapist, where my main objective with any child I work with is to get them to communicate no matter what their need. You can teach a child to do anything, no matter what their capacity is. You can teach them, you can encourage them, which is why I certainly have a job. Because I can see the potential in all my children, and I will push them and keep working to make sure they get further and further than what someone might assume they're capable of.
Yeah, and I always remember thinking when Stan was young that if I've got high expectations with him and then they're shot, well, it's only me who's going to be disappointed. Why not just have the high expectations at the risk of me being disappointed? I think one of the things in mainstream school, in a brilliant mainstream primary school, but at times I was just thinking, well, actually, more could be done here. More could be done, and that's why in secondary, when it's really important, it's good that he's in a special school.
100%. I mean, certainly having met Stanley in his primary school, in the mainstream school, he was doing well. He was doing well. However, the opportunities that have now been presented to him being in a special school for secondary are amazing. He's so much more independent as a result of it. And he's also striving in that environment. He's not the child that isn't as advanced as the others. He is now doing very well in that environment. He's learning well. He's in everything he's doing, he's progressing in that environment. But in addition to that, the child that I met when he was 10 compared to now, you can have such amazing conversations with him.
Not now though, he's scoffing pizza, isn't he?
Pizza. But he's got a lot to say, and he makes sure that you know it.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Stan, we're just talking about you. Yeah? All right.
You finished eating now?
He's gone all quiet.
Now he's quiet. Now you won't talk.
We go to the beach. The girl is touchable. It's the park.
Excellent.
Jamie's so passionate about Stan, and Stan, for his part, is now forming sentences and starting to read. And he also tidied his clothes yesterday unprompted. Well, I hope he's a good advert for Down syndrome, and that's following the Sally Phillips documentary. And Jamie's at www.jamieschneider.co.uk, or email me from my blog and I'll send you the details. And the music is kindly provided by www.bensound.com/royalty-free-music. And one more thing, the documentary and the interview with Jamie has served to remind me that Stan, like his brother, makes my heart miss a beat several times daily. Until next time.